The next playable game in the Kingdom Hearts 2.5 HD collection after Kingdom Hearts 2 is Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, more specifically its final mix on the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4. Birth by Sleep was originally released on the PlayStation Portable or PSP, and was released after Kingdom Hearts 358 by 2 days, a game set in between Kingdom Hearts and Kingdom Hearts 2, and if that weren't complex or different enough, Birth by Sleep's story takes place years before the first game, plus it features completely different playable protagonists and an overhauled combat system. Looking back, was this PSP game a good addition to the Disney Square crossover action JRPG series? Let's find out. The game features 3 campaigns with 3 playable main protagonists all running parallel to each other, and it is best to play through all of them to completely understand the story. All campaigns begin the same way though, with the 3 protagonists Terra, Aqua and Ventus, the latter looking like Roxas and even Sora, practicing as Keyblade apprentices. Terra and Aqua take an exam to achieve the Mark of Mastery, so they can become Keyblade masters like Ericus and Xehanort. Aqua succeeds, but Terra does not, having failed to control the darkness inside him. Shortly after, the Unversed reveal themselves as the new basic enemy, replacing the Heartless and Nobodies from other games, and invade many other worlds. Plus Xehanort vanishes. It is up to Terra and Aqua to investigate these developments, with a concerned Ventus going after them despite Master Ericus' wishes. It is clear that Xehanort, as well as his mysterious companion Vanitas, have an ulterior villainous motive. Finding out what it is, as well as fighting off the Unversed, leads the trio into a tale about light versus darkness, the power of the heart, and above all, a strong friendship that could potentially fall apart. In some respects, you don't need to have played the preceding Kingdom Hearts games to understand the story, because it mostly functions on its own, with the friendship between the 3 protagonists being the main theme. Still, there are some great moments and character developments that set up the rest of the series' timeline, which is pretty nice to see. Sometimes, the dialogue in certain moments are cheesy, plus there are aspects of the 3 endings that feel vague or lacking in resolution, even when you put all the pieces together. At the same time, the Disney stories tend to feel like sideshows that don't necessarily affect the main narrative. The amount of Final Fantasy characters featured is also next to none, which possibly demonstrates the series focusing more so on the original characters and storylines. Still, the story is reasonably compelling and very much lighthearted, with occasional moments of sadness and darkness, with the biggest draw being seeing the story from 3 different perspectives. The recommended order for the campaigns is Terra, then Ventus, then Aqua, but it's up to you. The presentation is pretty good. Well, it's a Kingdom Hearts game, that's to be expected. The graphics can be best described as an upscaled PSP game. It does look very nice with decent colours and smooth animation, though the areas do look a bit bland, and overall it's lacking some of the details that made the mainline Kingdom Hearts games look amazing. The sound is decent as well. The voice acting is generally well done when it comes to the English dub, and done by some notable talents like Leonard Nimoy and Mark Hamill, though some of it, such as that for Terra, is generally poor.
I do. But I also believe you have to make an effort to make them come true.
With the music, there are some nice new tunes, whether it's for new worlds or character themes or emotional cues. Some of the old tunes return in one way or another, including the Gummy Ship music in a rhythm minigame. However, the music can be fairly repetitive. There's only so much you can bear the looped track of Disney Town, for example. At least the transition to battle music can be considered to break up the repetition. That's where we come on to the gameplay. Let's look at the more familiar aspects of it first. The exploration, progressing, and of course platforming should make any Kingdom Hearts veterans feel right at home, for good and for bad. You explore a variety of worlds, most of which originate from Disney films that primarily feature princesses, such as Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. You take part in a very loose retelling of the original Disney film, or at least its key moments, which also involves taking out enemies, including bosses. Platforming is also a key feature again, like in previous games. It's roughly as good as it was in Kingdom Hearts 2, where it can be hard to land precise jumps due to the camera. The worlds are smaller, which is fitting for a handheld game, though this can lead to sometimes bland and filler-like level design. It can also be considered repetitive, considering you visit the settings essentially 3 times, once each with Terra, then an Aqua. Thankfully, each campaign generally sees you going to a different part of each world, complete with different story elements and bosses. As each of the 3 characters, there is plenty to find, including treasure chests, stickers, side content, and so on. The stickers, for example, not only look cute, but the more you collect, the more rewards and items you obtain. The same goes for the other collectibles, several of which may be out of your way at first unless you level up, mostly through combat. Okay, the combat. This is something different. The hack and slash with X button until enemies dead aspect is still here, but there is no magic meter, no cards, thank goodness, no drive forms. There aren't even any summons or AI partners like Donald and Goofy, though you do sometimes get a one-off partner, which tends to be a Disney character. The dominating mechanic is that of a command system, which allows you to customize a deck of techniques. This may sound similar to the card decks in Chain of Memories, but it is better. For one thing, the techniques have a short cooldown period after each use and can level up. It generally consists of a special technique such as cure or magic attacks like fire and thunder, and even applies to items like potions and ethers. With a combination of hack and slash attacks and commands, you build up a gauge to change to a command style. For example, using thunder commands to build the gauge will, obviously, give you a command style that will temporarily grant you more powerful thunder attacks, or surge commands. Increase the gauge to maximum during that time, and you'll use storm commands, which can consist of some of the craziest special moves seen in a Kingdom Hearts game at this point. In regards to the different commands, each of the three protagonists excel in different attributes. Terra is the most powerful at physical attacks, Ventus is the quickest attacker, and Aqua is the mage who excels at magic. And as any one character, you may draw power from the other two in the form of D-Links. D-Links consist of specific commands, level up, and have potentially devastating special moves, except you can only activate it when a blue gauge is completely full. Other D-Links include other characters like the Disney ones of Stitch and Snow White. Finally, the magic meter is replaced by a focus meter to perform Shockbox, a series of homing spells that you can cast on enemies targeted in a first-person view mode. However, there are moments where it feels like a command style you want at any given time doesn't appear despite using the right commands, but using them can make for one of the more varied combat systems in the series. The customization of these commands, abilities and shotlocks makes for a fair amount of replay value and experimentation, and can mostly make or break the potential difficulty. What that means is that some of the mechanics that can be utilized can be seriously overpowered. The shotlocks can not only target multiple enemies at once, but a single one such as a boss. With the right shotlock, that tough enemy is just about gone by the time your focus meter is depleted. Other finishing moves can deplete an enemy's health bar rapidly. But herein can lie a potential problem, which can depend more so on how you understand the tutorials towards the beginning of the game. In Chain of Memories, it seemed to be apparent you could not defeat a boss or maybe even certain enemy without a specific ability or slate, to the point of feeling stuck if you do not possess said ability that would break the system. That seems to apply here too, though it's less of an issue due to the relatively plentiful amount of commands to customize or level up. Some bosses or enemies are either too easy or too hard. When you start out, you may find the bosses to be a little tricky. Maybe I'm the only one, because your deck capacity is pretty small to begin with. For the most part, some enemies and bosses are not so much hard, but more just plain annoying. They seem beatable, you know you can beat them, you are doing everything generally right, yet there is that one move. That one move that can deplete your health quickly, especially if it's a combo. Or it's an airborne enemy that keeps on flying away. Also, when you press retry to try fighting a boss or enemy again, the items you use don't come back, instead of rewinding back to the first attempt. Am I missing something here? On standard/normal difficulty, you may find the game to be a little too easy, with the higher difficulty levels really relying on you blocking enemy attacks effectively or customizing your deck properly. One other interesting aspect of customizing commands is melding commands to make a more powerful one, with the possibility of a passive ability, such as an item boost. The catch is the two commands levels have to be maximum, and require a certain item such as a crystal. There are recipes that can help you determine what command you'll get, but experimenting is half the fun. Plus you can save before doing so if you really want to. There is a way to level up commands for melding and stuff besides equipping them for combat, and that is the use of the command board. It is essentially a board game similar to Monopoly and Fortune Street. Commands can be leveled up on the board, and depending on which board you choose, of which there are several, you can level up commands no problem and beat your opponents. The command board can be a little hard to understand at first, especially if you haven't played Fortune Street, but it's an okay time sink. The command board is just one aspect of the side content that is found throughout the game. There are a few mini-games to play at Disney Town, and depending on which campaign you do, playing any one of them is mandatory to progress in. One of them is a racing game akin to Mario Kart, which is obviously not as good, though you may get some enjoyment out of it. Otherwise, yeah, it's not that good of an inclusion. You can also do battle missions that have unversed when returning to certain worlds, which can also be fun and challenging, especially if you want to get the best rank. Speaking of rank, there is a Mirage Arena where you can participate in a series of matches against enemies, much like the tournaments in previous games. This combined with a command board and even the aforementioned racing minigame not only get you rewards, but are also playable in multiplayer. It seems a bit hard in today's age to figure out how to do the multiplayer, perhaps outside the PSP, or to personally see if it's any good, but hey, any multiplayer that involves fighting with keyblades and stuff is a good idea at its core. Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep overall feels like quite a good effort for a side Kingdom Hearts game on a handheld, especially in contrast to Chain of Memories. The presentation, general scope of the settings and story, and familiar yet interestingly different combat seem to make it stand out on the PSP. The PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 versions are obviously the most accessible releases to play, at least for me. But the question is, should you play it? It's a bit hard to say. The combat can be flawed, especially in regards to the camera, which also applies to platforming, as well as the difficulty level, regardless of the options of customization. Plus, it still consists of button mashing, which again may not appeal to you. Exploring the worlds can feel bland or repetitive due to the fact that you play the game essentially 3 times. Playing the game that way does make for interesting point of view storytelling, and expands the game time to that of approximately 30 hours or so, but it could be a drag to some. The side content also fails to be fun all the time, with some of it required, possibly to the point of absurd completionism, to unlock more of the story. It is best to play this game for the varied combat system, as well as much of the story, while indulging in the optional content as much as you deem appropriate. In conclusion, Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep is an enjoyable yet flawed Kingdom Hearts game that may please veterans and newcomers alike, once the joys of experiencing the combat, exploration, story, and even the revisiting of Disney films becomes apparent.